there are a ton of scenes in the 1000-Year Blood War arc that have been the subject of debate within the Bleach community for years now. Crazy moments and events that had such a huge impact on the story and world of Bleach itself that they upended what so many thought they knew about this series. Some of the moments in question have even proved controversial, stirring up questions regarding the specific characters involved. And there's no two ways about it, these moments are often a lot of fun. In fact, one such shocking and controversial scene is the topic of today's video, the latest installment in Bleach's best scenes. Many people wondered if this particular scene might be cut from the 1000-Year Blood War arc anime Core 3 due to the negative impact it has on the perception of not just any character, but the main character, Ichigo Kurosaki. Of course, the scene I'm referring to is none other than Ichigo's sad, unceremonious off-screen defeat at the hands of Sternritter D, the death-dealing Askin Naklavar, when he's, for lack of a better term, turned into a rug, in a shocking reveal that threw the readership for a loop back in the day, and likely did the same for new anime-only viewers just a month or so ago, when yes, the scene did indeed make it into the anime. So, without further ado, let's take a look at this scene, at how it was presented in both the manga and the anime, and what it meant for both characters involved, as well as for Kubo himself, and what kind of a narrative headspace he might have been in when this scene debuted all those years ago. Before we get started on the video, guys, there will be some spoilers for the remainder of the 1000-Year Blood War arc in this video to come, so make sure to take note of that. And of course, if you enjoyed today's video, then consider hitting subscribe when you're done with it to help push the channel to its next major milestone of 300,000 subs. I really would appreciate all of your help and support in reaching it. And speaking of your help and support, my second channel, Mr. Tomo Talks Games, is so very close. Less than 30 subscribers away from hitting 10,000 before the end of January. So if you're interested in games discussion about the industry, anything like that, go and check it out. Go and check out the link in the description and the pinned comment. If you like what you see there, consider subscribing and helping us reach that goal as well. Again, your support does mean the absolute world to me, so thank you all so very much. But regardless of whether you subscribed or not, the simple fact you're here at all is absolutely incredible, so thank you all very much. So, in both the manga and the anime, Ichigo and Askin come face to face during Kyoraku's battle with Leal, just as the Captain Commander activates his bankai. Again, the anime slightly changes this, but we'll get to that a bit later. Regardless, both times Ichigo is shown racing towards Askin when suddenly the sinister effect of Kyoraku's bankai floods the battlefield, catching both Ichigo and Askin off guard momentarily. The two of them aren't seen again until Kyoraku's battle is over, leaving readers to wonder how their fight might have played out, and if we'll get to see any more of it. But we don't. Like I said, Ichigo and Askin aren't seen again until after Kyoraku's battle has already come to an end. And when we do see them, we see Askin casually observing Gerard's fight from afar. It's a smart way to reintroduce Ichigo and Askin's battle to the audience after having not seen it for a few weeks, opening with Askin being so laid back as to be able to chill out while watching a different fight means a couple of different circumstances could have occurred while we've been away from this scenario. And so, as a reader of the manga, when you start this chapter, you see Askin in this situation, a few different ideas might flit through your head. Perhaps Ichigo somehow got past Askin and continued onwards to the castle. Maybe someone new turned up to assist Ichigo in this fight and he's been able to leave the fight to them. Or, most likely of all, Askin himself ran away from Ichigo to hide somewhere else. After all, there's a precedent for that, with Askin often excusing himself from battles. But then there is one other possible scenario. One that seems so ludicrous as to not even deserve to be entertained. Maybe Askin has somehow, against all odds, defeated Ichigo. I mean, he did just defeat Grimjo with ease, right? So Could it be possible? As Askin then asks someone whether they'd like to know more about the Schutzstaffel, it becomes clear that he isn't just musing to himself. Somebody else is there. And as Askin finishes idly mumbling about his comrades, he addresses none other than Ichigo himself. What on earth is going on? Maybe Ichigo too just came to a stop in the middle of their battle to gawp at the now colossal Gerard. However, Askin at last haphazardly notes that Ichigo likely can't hear him anymore, and that's when you turn the page. And yes, the madman actually did it. Kubo defeated his main character off-screen just like that. As we see Ichigo lying face down on the ground, Askin standing over him, well, it's about as unceremonious a defeat as you could imagine for a character of this caliber. And I say this caliber, it doesn't get any higher than this. Ichigo is the main character of the series. This is, of course, the moment that spawned a million memes. There's no denying that despite Kubo's immeasurable, unquestionable skill as an artist, Ichigo looks a little off here, and I don't just mean because he's been laid out. Well, actually I do just mean that, as he's quite literally been unfurled upon the stone floor like a carpet, leading so many to refer to him as having been turned into a rug by Askin. But all jokes aside, even today, this is a frankly unbelievable scene. A scene that I remember caught me by surprise in a big way, and a scene that has remained controversial to this very day. To the point where the community was, leading up to this episode's release, episode 39, was debating whether or not it would even show up in the anime at all, whether or not it did irreparable harm to Ichigo's character and whatever growth he's supposed to have attained by this point in the arc. It's tough to know exactly why this scene is here in the first place. Is it purely for shock value? Is it to hype Askin up, or to downplay Ichigo's own strength? Perhaps it exists to do both, or even all of those things. There's no doubt it is pretty shocking. Maybe even more so in the anime, where Ichigo's new power, thanks to acquiring his true Zanpakuto, has actually been effectively demonstrated by this point, unlike in the manga. In the manga, for as surprising as this was ultimately just another in a seemingly never-ending string of disappointments for Ichigo's character by this part of the story. What's perhaps weirdest about this scene overall, though, is the fact that it doesn't really have any bearing on the outcome of this whole scenario whatsoever. Askin handily defeats Ichigo, then rapidly defeats Chad and Orihime, before all three of them are just saved by Yoruichi. Mere minutes after Yoruichi's arrival, Ichigo is back on his feet, especially in the anime, and he, Chad and Orihime all head for the main fortress, while Yoruichi stays behind to take on Askin. It's weird in the sense that it isn't really treated like a big deal in-universe that Askin defeated Ichigo without so much as a scratch, likely besting him almost instantly. Again, the anime changes this somewhat, which we'll get into a bit later. But yeah, I mean, seriously, is nobody surprised / absolutely horrified that their main trump card, Ichigo of all characters, has been completely laid out flat by this random enemy? This guy is just one of Yhwach's mooks at the end of the day, albeit a very powerful one, a high-ranking one. But I mean, he's no Yhwach, that's for sure. And yet we're banking on this guy to defeat the Quincy King, and yet here he is, basically unconscious on the floor. No one seems to mind that whatsoever. Characters like Yoruichi don't even seem to really bring it up, which is a little bit of a surprise to me, but there you go. When it comes to how Askin defeated Ichigo, well, I've always thought he was crippled by the same gift bad that would later affect Chad and Orihime, and that all three of them were being poisoned by Varvelt's high-density reishi. As we can see, when the gift bad is exposed, that Ichigo is already fully trapped within it. But it could have easily just been a gift ball as well, or something like that. And again, the anime at least seems to imply that it was indeed a gift ball or two that did the trick, albeit an altered one. But in my opinion at least, this is a great scene precisely because of how it bucks the established trends and tropes of the story. In fact, Askin's entire character is predicated on doing just that. It doesn't matter that Ichigo is the main character here in this moment. He's defeated instantly simply because he's a terrible matchup for Askin, in the exact same way that Grimmjow was as well before him. And that's cool, I appreciate that. In fact, it's exactly because of that Askin racks up such an impressively high body count, one-shotting a huge chunk of the main cast of heroes by the time he actually engages in a proper fight, in a way that feels, frankly, unprecedented within the story itself. It's not that Ichigo is necessarily as thoughtless or as reckless when charging into battle as Grimmjow is, but they both fight in a similar melee-first fashion, and that's enough for Askin to get the drop on him. So at least in regards to how this all played out in-universe, aside from nobody freaking out that Ichigo was taken down with such ease, I'm totally okay with it. It makes sense to me. Is Ichigo considerably more powerful than Askin? Yeah, of course, there's barely a comparison to be had, but perhaps more than any other scene in Bleach, this particular scene shows that so-called power in Bleach isn't so easy to define. And a part of me thinks that's why the scene was so hard to swallow for so many. It goes against everything you've come to expect. There's a certain avant-garde feel to this scene, as though Kubo was gleefully rubbing his hands together and thought, I can get away with this, maybe, and even if I can't, who's to stop me? I think that's another reason I really do believe this is one of the great scenes of the series. It is borderline experimental in the way it treats the main character, and I really appreciate the guts that it takes to do something like this. Does it make Ichigo look good? Absolutely not, but it does make Askin look good, and if that's solely what Kubo was going for in this moment, then I think it totally works. The almost 50-50 split on how people feel about Ichigo being turned into a rug by Askin only adds to the effectiveness of the scene itself too. But also on top of that, as another layer to this whole situation, it really effectively shows off what Askin's power is, what separates it from the rest, and why it is so dangerous. If even a fighter as powerful, as skilled, and as experienced as Ichigo can legitimately be brought down, defeated like this in an instant. The death dealing, then, does not work like most other abilities in Bleach. Let's move on to look at the build-up to this shocking moment and how the anime altered it somewhat significantly, in my opinion, to make it just that bit easier to accept, in a way that feels like these changes were aimed squarely at manga readers who already knew or had a hunch that it was coming. In the manga, Ichigo comes across Askin long after the sternritter has already defeated Grimmjow and left him somewhere else in another part of Varvelt. Although Ichigo has no interest in Askin's antics, a character trait we've seen in Ichigo before when he comes up against these more tricky fighters, he does try to confirm outright whether or not Grimmjow actually lost to Askin, clearly trying to gauge how strong his enemy is. Askin is quite unique, I think, in the way he doesn't give anything away at all. We've said before he is very genre savvy, and in my opinion he is clearly depicted as being completely in control in the manga version of their encounter here, not giving an inch to Ichigo whatsoever. The encounter ends with Ichigo rushing a smirking Askin, and as I said earlier, I think the implication is that Askin defeats him very quickly and easily, perhaps right after this moment. However, the anime makes some big changes to how their initial meeting goes. In the anime, Askin defeats Grimmjow in the exact same way he does in the manga, only for Ichigo to immediately find them, as he was following Grimmjow at the time. As such, Ichigo sees with his own 2 eyes that Askin quickly put Grimjo down with barely a struggle, and Askin therefore loses the advantage of surprise. In another big change, we actually see that the 2 of them do have a fight, even if it does occur off screen. Ichigo clearly is not defeated immediately here. When we return to them a couple of episodes later, Askin goes flying backwards, clearly on the receiving end of Ichigo's attacks, and he groans that this is exactly why he didn't want to fight Ichigo of all characters. Somehow, Ichigo is unaffected by Askin's reishi poisoning, and interestingly, Askin himself muses that it must have something to do with the royal training Ichigo received at the hands of Ichibei. When Ichigo all but confirms this, Askin states that now that he knows the truth, he simply just needs to adjust the flavour of his poison to bring Ichigo down. Now, in what might be a fatal flaw, Ichigo clearly isn't really listening to him at this point, but this is the anime's way of saying, look, Askin was not able to defeat Ichigo immediately, and likely wouldn't have been able to defeat him at all had he not realised that Ichigo had spent time in the royal palace before. So, this is interesting, and frustratingly, the anime never actually explains how Askin defeats Ichigo in the end anyway. But I think we can put 2 and 2 together. Maybe. Askin says that Ichigo isn't being affected by reishi poisoning specifically, so that presumably means that he is currently trying to poison Ichigo with Varvelt's high-density reishi, just like he does later to Chad and Orihime. The reason it perhaps isn't working then is because Ichigo has built up a resistance to that particular reishi thanks to all the weird training he did in the palace, including in Irazu Sando. So Askin simply decides to change what he poisons Ichigo with. But that's the frustrating part. We never find out what he ends up using to poison Ichigo and bring him down. I have a theory that we might find out what happened when Askin manages to bring down Yoruichi, because in that moment he tells her that he infused his gift ball with other elements, and so maybe we'll find out that that's exactly what he did to Ichigo as well. Piggybacking off that Yoruichi moment, Askin mentions that he infuses his gift balls with certain elements, so we're supposed to take away from this that he had successfully struck Ichigo with a gift ball filled with Varvelt's high-density reishi, and it didn't work. Another thing that I'm not too sure about in regards to this exchange between the 2 of them is, what do the weird techniques that Askin surmises Ichigo learned in the royal palace have to do with anything here? So, what, if any, are the repercussions of this scene? Did it have a negative impact on Ichigo's character, or the perception of him at least? Certainly, as I said earlier, Askin is weaker than Ichigo, and it's definitely unusual for the main character to be dropped like it's nothing, particularly while in what is ostensibly the final stretch of the story. It feels like a bump in the road for Ichigo, for sure. What makes it worse in the manga, at least, is that Ichigo simply hasn't done anything at all with his newfound power since returning to the fight in the midst of the second Quincy invasion, bar one single Getsuga Jujisho. So it looked and felt even worse when he was instantly defeated here. Frankly, it was almost expected. It's a little different in the anime, at least in my opinion. Sure, Ichigo was still suffering from a string of losses by this point, but at the same time it's just not quite the same. He had been given numerous new opportunities to really show what he could do with his true Shikai, including incredible, godlike Getsuga Jujisho strikes that simply did not exist in the manga, and likewise battles with both Yuha Bark and Uryu. So, yeah, while the inclusion of this scene might still rub some people the wrong way with the disservice it does to Ichigo, I don't think it's as egregious in the anime at all. And yeah, perhaps it does do a disservice to him, to the main character. Again, the fact it comes so close to the end of the story is weird. But I'd argue it is nowhere near as bad as breaking his bankai right before the final opportunity to really see it, and by extension Ichigo, in action. I think most people understand that Askin is not your average fighter and that the standard rules of Bleach don't really apply here. And maybe that's exactly what Kubo was trying to express with this moment. Who better to use in such a way than Ichigo himself? This is a challenging scene, and that's why I love it. It's Kubo at his most daring in many ways, even if, as I said, what happens here has no real bearing on anything moving forward. It's shock value, sure, at a superfluous level, but it is well done, and it got people talking too. It's Kubo taking his main character and thinking, you know what, I don't need to put this guy on any more of a pedestal than he already is. And, you know, maybe he even needs bringing down a few places too, though I'm not entirely sure why he'd think that. But whether you liked this moment or not, it smacks of a more confident author with much less to lose at this late stage in the game, and from a writing perspective, that's interesting to me. Plus, you know, I love Askin as well, and this was yet another seemingly instantaneous defeat at the hands of his Shrift, the Death Dealing, that was just so incredulous to behold, and it just kept happening as well. And so, for all of these reasons and more, I definitely think that this frankly crazy moment is one of Bleach's best scenes. Alright guys, but that's it for today's video. As always, I really hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you took something of value away from this video as well. Let me know down in the comments below, what do you think of this particular scene, this controversial moment where Askin turns Ichigo into a rug. He instantly defeats him using the Death Dealing, and seemingly flips our perception of maybe what it means to be a main character, what kind of treatment a main character should receive in the story, especially at this late in the game. I would love to hear all of your thoughts down in the comments below. Do you like this scene? Do you not like this scene? Do you think it's controversial? Or do you think it doesn't really mean anything? It has no bearing on the events surrounding it, so who really cares? I'd love to hear all of your thoughts, no matter which way, whichever side of the argument you fall on. Do please let me know down in the comments below. Thank you so very much for watching as always, guys. Make sure to check out my second channel, Mr. Tomo Talks Games. Maybe give it a subscribe if you like what you see over there. And as always, I want to end the video by saying a massive thank you and giving a huge shout out to my wonderful supporters over on Patreon. I really do appreciate each and every one of you so very much. If you want to take your support for me that extra step further and support me over on Patreon, you can do just that, like all of these people are, and the support does mean the absolute world to me. At the $1 a month tier, you can get your name in the credits just like this, and at the $2 tier or higher, you can enjoy all of my videos absolutely free of baked-in YouTube ads. Alright guys, once again, thanks so very much for watching. Until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.